Hey, friends, welcome to the Journey Home podcast. Today I have Daniel and Tiffany Stephens on. If you remember, they were on earlier talking about racial reconciliation because we all do a small group together and they are our wonderful small group leaders. But
Yay.
today we're going to talk about a different topic, which is infertility. I'm so grateful that Dan and Tiff are on today to just share more about their journey so that they could hopefully encourage some of you guys out there who are trying for just a beautiful miracle. And so, Dan and Tiff, could you please tell us some of your story, like how long you've been married, things like that?
Sure. Well, I'll go first because I feel like anytime the how long you've been married question pops up is always like a test for the husband, right? So we have been married for 14 years, approaching 15 in June, June 22nd to be
Good job.
exact.
Oh,
Good job.
nice. All right. Well, Chris is always the one who is able to keep count for us. But okay, that's awesome. So, how long did you guys try to get pregnant before you started seeing the doctors?
Well, so in the beginning, Daniel was actually very wanted to have babies within the first couple of years, and
Oh.
I was not. um, and it was in that moment we had this like conversation about, well, what are we going to do about contraception, or like, and that just kind of became a thing. And so in that time, there was a lady that approached me at church and I didn't even know her. And she said, I had a dream about you and you were so happy and you were dancing. And I had to ask you, what were you so happy about? Again, I don't really know her. And in the dream, I told her that I was pregnant. So from that point on, we just trusted the Lord that if I was going to get pregnant the next day, then I would. And if I wasn't, then I wouldn't. And so, after that, about 5 years was when I started getting the itch and ultimately the baby itch, the baby fever. And at 8 years was when we conceived our daughter. So, but it was right at that 5 year mark where I was like, okay, what's going on? Let's actually go talk to the doctors.
I think even sooner than that, right? Like first 2 years, like she said, was definitely me, and then I think it transitioned more so to her. But the itch becoming like a oh my gosh, what is going on here? Definitely, at that 5 year mark was really starting to hit hard.
Yeah.
Okay. So at that 5 year mark, is that when that lady had the dream or at what?
Oh, I'm sorry. It was like weeks into our marriage because yeah,
Oh,
again, he was
okay.
really wanting to, and I was like, no, this is early in our marriage. I'm still young. And it was like when we got back from our honeymoon, it was like within a month she had shared that. So
Wow.
that's why we
Wow.
were
Okay.
Lord, yeah.
Wow. Okay,
So easy,
so
right? Just
uh-huh.
trusting in the Lord. Everything was
Mhm.
peachy keen. But yeah, we definitely had some trials and struggles along the way.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So what did the doctors say at like what was their diagnosis?
Well, they first test the man. And so Daniel was all good. And so for me, they did a lot of blood tests, and essentially the diagnosis was a low ovarian count. So my FSH at a particular level, which stands for follicle stimulating hormone, the levels were too high at a certain time of my cycle. So that indicates that I have a low ovarian reserve. And so they were trying to give me a lot of hormonal treatments, which only messed up my hormones and my hair. So,
Mhm.
yeah,
Wow.
that's kind of when some of those treatments and everything started happening.
Okay. So then were they saying like it'd be virtually impossible to get pregnant or kind of
Yeah,
challenging or
they said it would be challenging, and our next step at that point was IVF, which is a 50, in vitro, and it's about a $15,000 treatment, which you don't know whether or not it's going to be successful. So
wow.
you were kind of
Okay.
yeah.
Wow. Okay. So what was the hardest part? I'm sure there were so many challenging things in this journey, but what would you say was the hardest part of just the infertility journey?
Well, I'll go with that first. For me, I'm the last Stevens in my family. And so keeping the family line going, there's always been that pressure in the back of my mind. But, you know, my default, Tiffany can be very practical with things, and sometimes I can be super spiritual. And so it's like the Lord will provide, the Lord will take care of it. And that's easy said, in the first couple of years or whatever else, and then you're not seeing things materialize. The thing I think that was the most difficult thing for me though was learning to be sensitive to Tiffany in this process, right? Um, when she would see different people getting pregnant, it's, you want to celebrate them, and you do, but at the same time, it's like, God, when is it going to be my turn? And more importantly for me as a husband, I want to provide for my wife, right? And so when she's not getting what she wants, it's one thing when I went through my first couple of years, and then we transition into, okay, now she's starting to get the itch, and then we both really want to have a child, and it's not happening. For a man, it's a struggle to see your wife struggle like that and know that she really wants something that you can't provide her in that dispensation of time. And so seeing her struggle and learning to become sensitive to all kinds of things, whether it's mixed messages, whether, again, it's other people getting pregnant, whether it's a slew of different things that could trigger her being perfectly chipper and happy into then, going into a place of not, dare I say, depression. I mean, it was that real.
Yeah. And I think for me, it was a lot of just the enemy speaking lies on me, and some of the major ones that hit. And it was a monthly reminder, right? Of you're not worthy. You're built wrong. The Lord didn't make you correctly. And just that mental gymnastics in your head every month coming to hit me about my worth, about how important, I am to the Lord. And it's like, Lord, why, I took it as a punishment. And then as the days drew on, some of the more harder things was just holidays, commercials of diapers, those kind of things. Just, I just had to distance myself from some of it. There was a really popular show that I love to listen to, and one of the personalities there got pregnant. And so they were sharing about that sometimes. And I just had to stop listening for a season, because it just seemed like it was everywhere. Mm-hmm. And so I just, holidays, everything, it was pretty tough.
Or people that weren't necessarily trying to get pregnant, that got pregnant. It's like, then that really hits at home. It's like, wow, here we are almost desperate to have a child, really wanting to have, something, and other people that, really maybe can't identify with our struggle. And not only that, they're not really wanting to have babies. And it's not a knock on them per se, but it was just like, dagger in the heart, and just something that we had to work through before the Lord, but especially for her.
Well, that is intense. I can't imagine, because, those reminders are actually everywhere, especially at church, or just walking in the grocery store, or like you said, just like a TV commercial. That's so challenging. I'm sorry. So how did you eventually get pregnant? So you guys have a beautiful 6-year-old, and she is a shining light to many. Like, she just runs up on Sundays and gives us hugs, and she's adorable. So how did you eventually get pregnant with her?
Well, it was really interesting. I was on a work trip, and down to Atlanta. And I remember previously I had met up with a friend, but before I'd met up with her for like a lunch, she had already told me about, there was some place in Atlanta to go. It's like a Korean bathhouse, and people have typically gotten pregnant there from the treatment that they offer. And you would think for someone that was like on a work trip in Atlanta, like that would be at the forefront of my mind, especially because it was, I think we were maybe 7 years, 6 years in, right? 7 years. And so, but it wasn't. And so I just attribute that to to kind of the miraculousness of how I was down in Atlanta anyway. So I met up with this lady and with a friend, and we were talking, and she said, "Hey, are you still?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And she was like, "Well, I can take you down to that place." And I was like, I could go to that place, and it was just so really interesting. And so I went, and shortly after, came home and got pregnant. And so I attribute all of that, kind of the way that unfolded, obviously from prayer, from the Lord, just being able to open that window up, and for a free trip down to Atlanta because I was working. And it was definitely a lot cheaper than the $15,000 IVF treatment. And so, yeah.
And like you were saying, it wasn't even on her radar to go down to Atlanta for that reason. So we know we believe in divine appointments, and just so thankful she was able to link up with her friend and be reminded of that. But go ahead, you were going to say.
I forgot. I wanted to share. So the actual treatment is going to a bathhouse, and the treatment is called getting a Korean hip bath. And we can include more information on that later. But essentially, you're taking a bowl of herbs and you're steaming it up your hips. And so when I got pregnant, they noticed that I had fibroids. And one of the benefits of that hip bath is to shrink fibroids. So natural human understanding could correlate those two together, outside of the divine movement of God. But yeah, so with that, and I did not know this, that fibroids do cause infertility, but I didn't know that I had it. So it was really interesting how that naturally came to pass.
And fibroids as in plural, so she had many. And so, and for me, just with her going down, I'm like, Korean hip bath, right? This is just me not I'm like, what in the world is she talking about? Like, what, and I think we in Western society sometimes we become very comfortable with the things that we have direct access to, and we become uncomfortable with the things that we don't necessarily know. And so it's just like kind of a conviction on me. It's like my mind, what kind of hippy dippy stuff are we talking about here? Like, but in reality, it looks like it was one of the very things that God utilized to help us get pregnant. And so I think about that, Eunice, for your listeners or anybody else, just in general that would be hearing this, that may be going through the infertility journey. And, that's something you should probably look into that's not regularly talked about through, your doctors out here. I know that wasn't mentioned to us via any of the doctors that we had gone to during our struggle. And my hope would be that if I don't know, if it helps 1% of the population of people struggling with infertility, then praise God. Somebody else has got it, and somebody else hopefully has had a healthy child.
When Tiff told me this story, I really couldn't believe it. As a Korean American, I was shocked. But there are things, yeah, you're right, like that. The Lord can use all things, and I was just amazed. And I do want to visit a Korean bathhouse now. Just for fun. But yeah, seriously, Tiff, when you told me that story, I was just like, how can that be? So it'd be funny if any of my Korean friends comment in this. Have you ever heard of this hip bath? Because I had never heard of it. Not that that's shocking, because I don't know that much about Korean baths, but so
well, just thing, clothing, you cannot have clothing. That's all.
I think that's why I've avoided Korean baths all these years. Actually, a funny story, when I was a kid, my sister and I went to Korea as teens, and when we went to a Korean bathhouse, and when we realized like you couldn't wear clothes, we didn't go in. So literally we sat outside the bath the whole time, hours, waiting for my aunts and my cousins. And every worker that walked by would laugh at us, and they'd say, "Oh, those are the foreigners. They won't go inside." But that was just us at the time. So Turkish baths are the same too. Funny. But so just to pivot a little in this conversation. So Daniel and Tiff have an amazing testimony, a beautiful 6-year-old. And recently Daniel has announced that he wrote a song around just their journey. And so Daniel, can you guys share, how did this song come about?
Great question. Um, so there's the baby shower was getting ready to happen, some years ago. And um, I believe divinely inspired with a melody that was just ringing out. And then if you know me, and I try to surprise this woman here, from time to time. And I have been on a bit of a mission to try to make her cry with any of the artistic things I try to present to her. And I did this at our wedding. I sang a song for her. No
Aww.
tears. No tears. No tears.
Okay.
I did engagement, did a spoken word, no tears. So nothing, no waterworks whatsoever. But yes, it was before the baby shower, and I got this melody, and rather quickly, I want to say same day or within a couple days, I felt like I had just a whole song, and I really do believe it was just divinely inspired. Nothing that I can really take much credit for. And so anyways, I finally did sing the song for her during the baby shower, and waterworks, let me tell you, it was like two fire hydrants, just blah.
Don't. It's a little embellishing.
And we argue about this a little bit. But she thinks it's more towards the bridge of the song when she started crying. I'm thinking it was like the first sentence.
Yeah.
But
when he sang the bridge, that's where it was just one of these.
And now there is video evidence of this, so we can always go back and double check and see.
Yeah, I'd love to see the video. So what is your what was your hope in writing this song?
My hope, upon being divinely inspired, I began to see the song as bigger than just our story, right? That it is a song for hope, the restoration of hope, and not for just people that are going through infertility, even though that's huge, right?
Right.
But people that are just they're struggling before the Lord for a longing to be fulfilled. And so my belief in this song and its releasing, which has not been a short work by any means. You think 8 years to get the story first and foremost, and then another 6 years to finally be releasing the song. We're talking about a combined 14 years. And now this song is finally being released. And so my belief is it's a prophetic announcement for breakthrough for people. And a true call to restoration, to hope in Christ, that not that he can, not that he might, but that he will break me. My longing fulfilled will happen.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. So I'm sure there's so many lessons you guys have learned on this journey, but what do you believe, or if you just have some to share, that God has taught you through this infertility journey?
Yeah, for me, it's God's timing is so perfect. And so the scripture where it talks about a longing fulfilled is sweet to the soul. There are just some things in motherhood that I'm seeing that I'm so appreciative now that I don't know how much I would have been earlier on in our marriage. There were some things personally that I needed to make sure I worked on our marriage. And so looking back, there were some things we got to enjoy. And there were some things we had to learn. And so now when I have her, and there are times, it's not every moment is perfect, but just being able to have that sweet fulfillment and having her and being appreciative of that time with her, I have more of a flexibility now than I would have then. And I think God just knew that about me. He just did. And I think it goes back to that dream completely and fully trusting. And it was really hard. I mean, don't get me wrong, but believing that was God's promise for me, and then being able to steward that well, to steward our daughter's life well. I just God's timing. And so that would be my hope to share.
Yeah, I agree with that. I have this conversation with Tiffany, I don't know if often is the right way to say it, but every once in a while for sure, just that had the Lord blessed us with a child. I mean, I don't know if I would have considered it a blessing at that point at 3 years into our marriage because of the things that we had to work on as a couple. The additional responsibility of fatherhood, of motherhood, it could have been the thing that pushed us over the edge in a negative way. And so when Tiffany says, God knows best, God knows best, and God knows best to your listeners who may have a longing in their heart that they're believing God for. His timing is perfect, and he's outside of time, but he's also the perfect orchestrator of time when your blessings and when your things come to fruition. And so knowing that it's just in his character to be loving and to be a good father and to be one that provides for his children, that we can really take, we can take faith in that and be encouraged by that greatly. And so just looking back for me, I want people to identify with the hope that God knows your struggle. He's not surprised by what you're going through. He loves you. He's got you in the palm of his hand. If you can just manage to allow yourself to stay there in his time, he will bring forth your beautiful blessing according to his perfect will. And it will be a far better story that he can write for you than you can ever write for yourself.
That's awesome. Wow. Okay. So, and do you guys have any last words of encouragement, especially for those who are longing to be parents and just like believing the Lord for a miracle in their marriage and their life?
Yeah, I think for the woman who's trying to, if I were to encourage myself those years ago, one of the things that I really loved hearing from the Lord is that there is nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you in your womanhood. There's nothing wrong with you in your ability to conceive. There is nothing wrong with you. You are literally beautifully, wonderfully made, and you are loved and you are valued, and God sees you. And so, so take that as value for how God sees you.
And I think, yeah, that's beautiful, babe. I think with respect, it's that fine balance, right? You don't want to sound like you're talking down to anybody's faith. And so for somebody that is continuing to believe, keep believing, keep trusting the Lord. I mean, there are people that have stories of infertility that surpassed ours by far and still got pregnant, right? So, but I also want to speak to the audience who may have been in a position where they are not on the journey anymore to birth the child themselves, and to say to them that if that is a place that they have peace in the Lord in, that they should absolutely be encouraged with the role to fatherhood, the role to motherhood. It does not stop without, just because we can't necessarily give literal birth to our child, that parenting, fatherhood, motherhood is a calling, right? And there's obviously adoption. And if you have adopted, that doesn't make, for some reason that, you've necessarily missed the boat, or somehow your faith was not okay, or, I think a serious encouragement needs to be shared with people that have taken on the calling of fatherhood and motherhood expressed in other ways than just literal birth. And praise God for you. What an amazing selfless calling to be embarked upon. So God bless you for doing that, and you're changing generations.
So final parting words would be 8 years is releasing April 15th.
April 15th.
And so that'll be on all the streaming platforms. Share, listen, and just stay tuned with us.
And there's some other 8-year songs out there from what I could see. So this would be 8 years by Daniel Stephens.
Yes.
That is I, and that is Stephens, Stephephens.
Yes.
Awesome. Yeah. And I could definitely link the, is it going to be on YouTube or something?
Yeah, it's going to be on all of it. Yeah.
Okay. So we can link that when that comes out in like the comments or something. Yeah. I love what you guys shared, especially Tiff, like what you were saying, about just like a woman's like value and worth. Because something, you know, I am a mother of 5 kids, but something that the Lord very clearly showed me once was just how significant it is that like that is not my identity. Like I was valuable to the Lord at birth before I became a mom, you know, before I was married to Chris. So even this is a message for singles too, is that like our identity, you know, and you know, in Psalm 139 is like our identity, it was we are fearfully and wonderfully made, each one of us. Yes. And God is the one who gives us our identity. It is not a role. Like I'm a wife now, so now I have more identity, or I'm a mother now, so I have more identity, or whatever. And so I think that's such a important encouragement to everyone who is wrestling with that identity, is like, you know, who am I in the Lord, you know? And once we find that our value and worth is in the Lord, I feel like so many things open up in our lives of understanding. And so I just love your story, guys. I love your family. And really, I'm excited about this song being released. And I am encouraged. I think a lot of people will be given hope through your story and your testimony. So thank you guys so much for being on today.
Thank you so much for having us. We appreciate it.
Love you guys so much. And thank you all for listening. I hope you all have an amazing week. Bye-bye.